Hello, everybody. I think I accidentally moved this before I started the stream, so I need to just check that it's in the correct place. Hey, Quindy, happy Halloween. Um, I'm guessing there must be a few people who enjoy our hobby who aren't big on Halloween, but I'm also guessing that most of us are. So this is probably a favorite holiday for a lot of people. And I know, even though I don't really celebrate that much anymore by like decorating and getting in costume and stuff, it is still a favorite holiday of mine. I guess I celebrate by painting miniatures instead, which hopefully some of you have been painting some nice spooky miniatures. So I happen to have this. I don't think that painting with tentacles is going to be a practical proposition, so I suspect I will soon dispense with this lovely costume. I used to, when I first moved to America, I worked in a game store and it was in a mall. And the mall would do like a little trick or treat thing where, you know, the kids would just go in this like giant circle down the halls and trick or treat. So I got some goofy hats because that way I could still wear my shirt. You know, we had like set shirts that we were supposed to wear. This one, the other one was a fish, but this one actually frightened the little kids quite a bit. So I felt kind of bad about that. But there it is. It didn't want to go on at first. I'm like, how could my head possibly have grown? I think heads pretty much stay the same size. Valender the Red just took a picture of his own Halloween costume. Well, why wouldn't you? You want to remember the efforts that you made for Halloween. I see we have also got green users on. Hi, Bob and Julie. Yeah, and this is kind of hot too. So I think we'll dispense with the octopus. Well, maybe I'll keep it on until I finish, you know, kind of the summary of where we are. So last week I worked on this figure. I didn't quite have her finished. I finished her last night because I wanted to. It was pretty close, which was like a tabletop adaptation of this figure. And the latest post on my blog talks about kind of choosing the colors and adapting them for the tabletop version. So it kind of talks about both ways and techniques, excuse me, that you can use to get colors to work better together. So if that is a thing that troubles you, you can check that out. Hopefully I'm not starting that up again, but I'm stocked up with cough drops just in case. And I believe I did not see any notes last time I checked with Ron, which was a couple of days ago. There were still some of the ghoulie bags in stock at the American store. And I checked the Facebook right before I started the stream, and I didn't say anything about those being out of stock. Maybe Quindy knows. Quindy knows everything. But if you didn't get these and the paint that comes with it, which I cleaned up because I'm painting something else today, but you get a paint called Wolfsbane Purple. It's like a special edition paint. And then, how can I possibly forget? Because I've said the name of this paint like 4 million times. Dungeon Slime, which is currently released paint. And then I use Pumpkin Orange, but which is another special edition paint from previous Halloweens. But Orange Brown is a similar enough color that I think it would do pretty similar things to what I've done here. So last week we were talking about kind of how to do the quick version of a slightly more like this color. Painting this one involved a lot of color mixing and stuff. So I talked about how to do the quick version of that. We did some glazing, and we also talked about how to deal with colors that are pretty transparent, because Wolfbane Purple and Pumpkin Orange are both pretty transparent, and I believe that Orange Brown is as well, because that's just some pigments. So if you want like nice bright saturated versions of them, you have to do that. I had these on my desk still, so we'll just that painting figures differently can make them look different, which if you do role-playing games. Quindy says that the ghoulie bag is still available for checkout. If you play role-playing games, you've probably already had some figures that you've painted with different paint schemes, so they look like different figures. And this is what I did for last year Halloween, which I did not go look at. It's a pretty early episode. I think it's like 4, 5, or 6. And this is kind of a preview of what I'm going to do this year. So this was a special figure from last year. It's been available previously as well, that I painted in a monochromatic paint scheme. And this is similar to the colors that I used for the store, the web store thing, the first time this was a promotion. But I'm going to do something different today, just a little bit different. But before I do that, so this is the Dark Sword version of the Kathy Wapple figure. Reaper now has up a Bones USA version. So if you go over to the Reaper store, maybe you didn't get your Gula bag yet, you could grab some of these. And so Jason Weeby sculpted it, and Reaper's donated kind of the production costs, and Jason donated his time. Kathy Wapple and her husband Jim are big members of the miniature community. I'm guessing most of you here have already heard of them. But Kathy's dealing with cancer, and that's really tough, especially when you're people who survive by freelancing. So this is a charitable effort to help them out. I haven't got I'm going to get some of the Reaper ones, but I hadn't got it yet, so I just thought this shows you the sculpt. And Quindy has put the link into chat, and now I need to put this somewhere more protected so it doesn't get covered with paint. So what am I going to do today? Let's get my crummy thing. Well, actually, before that, let's look at my palette, because that's going to give you a big clue about what I'm going to do today. Nope, I have not switched the camera to black and white again, because I'm just going to paint black and white. So our vampire friend that is the miniature of the month this month, and it seemed like a really good candidate to do like an old movie style kind of true black and white monochromatic figure. And no spoilers, I'm not going to say anything, but if you haven't watched Werewolf by Night, the Marvel holiday special, I think is what they're calling it, it's certainly very holiday seasonally appropriate, and also kind of inspired me to do a monochromatic color scheme, a black and white movie style scheme, which is useful to do for other reasons than just being atmospheric. But I've been talking a bunch about color lately, and now I have no colors. And having no colors is challenging. It does change the equation. We use color as a shorthand for a lot of things. We use color, I just wrote a whole article about how you can make colors work together. And I talk all the time about, if you put certain colors here or there, it helps draw attention, or it helps draw attention away. And I have none of those tricks now. And that is a good thing to do now and then, to give yourself that challenge, because you'll find out some of the other things you could or should be doing in your painting. So you can have color, and then you can also have, how zoomy can I get? That's the most zoomy, so I think that's probably the correct level. So it pushes you to explore other things you can bring to your painting, and then you bring those to your painting when you use color as well. So this may look similar to how the witch started last week, because I did the same thing where I did this is primer, and I just customized the primer color to the values I want to use on those areas. It's going to especially be a shortcut on this guy, but you can see like I can start that way and end up quite differently. I did paint the black with pure black, because I noticed last week when I was painting the black on her that you do so little highlighting on black that I wanted a nice coverage of black paint before I even started. So let's get started. I think it's also useful to look at vampires as kind of a value study thing, but we will talk about that more later. Do I have a brush I like? You'd think I would like all my brushes, but it would be wrong. I did paint the eyes first as well. And they're a little tricky because he's got this collar and his hand is up. So I did my, if you aren't aware why I paint the figures with the eyes off to the side, and she had the same thing, I think, if we can barely see her eyes, it's easier than trying to get two eyeballs looking straight at you. So whenever there's kind of a challenge with getting my brush control optimized, and it can also be interesting from a story standpoint. I mean, here I think he's kind of, he's got like leather armor. I think he's supposed to be sort of like a leading troops kind of a vampire. So he might be looking back to make sure they're all doing what he said. So I don't, because I did this with primer, I don't know the actual values that match my colors. And these are just, so it's pure black and pure white. I wanted to make sure I didn't have any hint of color in my blacks and whites. And then noir black, stormy gray, cloudy gray, rainy gray, misty gray, foggy gray. So all of the ones that are kind of weather named are true neutrals. And I have a couple of in-between mixes that years ago I mixed up some intermediary mixes, which are the ones kind of up there for painting non-metallic metal. So when I'm trying to get things super, super smooth, I have like a 12 stage thing. But here my proposition will more be that I've got different color areas that I have to distinguish in some way. So I'm actually not going to start with his face. I'm going to start with his shirt, which does look like one of those, traditionally speaking, kind of puffy white aristocrat shirts. So I'm just going to realize now that my gray primer is a little shiny, so I am going to put a coat of gray all over the shirt. And then I may actually, now that I think about it, start with the inside of the cloak, because that's going to be a tough area to not mess up if I start working on the pants and whatnot. And you can already see part of the no color challenge. So it's like, well, his skin and his shirt are the same value, and his pants and his armor are the same value, and his boots and his cape are the same value. And if I was painting this any kind of traditional vampire look, I would end up with that. I'd end up with pale skin and pale clothing somewhere else, and dark stuff and dark something somewhere else. And I don't have the red or the purple that we would normally throw into that mix to help distinguish different areas. At least I don't have them at this time. I could do that this way and then add color later. I don't know that I'm going to do that, but I could. I have a noir detective guy somewhere, and I painted some of in a previous. I periodically teach classes on painting monochromatically. So he's an example of that. I painted a bunch of them for Reaper. I think there were 5 or 6 from the Deadlands. I want to say they're in the Deadlands line. And those ones do kind of the Pulp Fiction thing, which is from their concept art. I was matching concept art, so I shouldn't get too much credit for the designs of those, other than when we're dealing with kind of the challenges I'm talking about with having limited values. We have fewer tools, and this is actually true if we're working with color. We have fewer tools than someone who's drawing or painting a picture, because we can't control the background at all. We can't just fade out the arm, and that's not part of the picture. Like we have to paint the whole thing, and we have to use tools only on the miniature to draw attention where we want and take attention away from where we don't want. I mean, you can photograph them and do some other stuff, but talking about purely in terms of a miniature, and you're putting it down on your game table, you're putting it up on your shelf, or you're giving away as a gift, it has to be standalone unless you're going to put it in a diorama. Malander had a question. Let's see. I use the stone grays as warm grays, but sometimes they're not actually warm enough. Yeah, you could just add a little more brown or whatever. And I like those. I just wanted to do a true, black and white movie feel for these. How heavy is my visor? I may have made a huge mistake with mine. It's so heavy, it gives me headaches if I use it more than 10 to 15 minutes per hour. I love this model. So this is called the OptiSight by Donegan. And I do specifically recommend this brand. Like, I have tried a couple other visor brands and they sucked. One of them was like Cinderella's visor. It took me years to find someone whose eyes wouldn't go squiggly when they put it on. So this is just, you've got a light plastic headband. You could do it. I know some people who actually wear it more like this, but I think it is designed to be worn on the forehead. It's got the padding for your forehead. So the other kind I have, this is the original Optivisor, which I bet Julie is wearing one of these right now. Which is the other reason I recommend the Donegan brand. I mean, that's the one you see sculptors using. So if it's good enough for sculptors, it's definitely good enough for us. Because I have to see even more details. So this, first of all, I can't have my ponytail with this. This one isn't like super heavy, but it is heavier. It's way sweatier because there's a lot more on you, and I don't like it as well. I keep it around because this has like my highest detail plate in it, I think. So when I'm doing something really fiddly freehand or eyeballs and I'm having trouble with it or something, I pull this out. And then I have two of these that are different magnifications, depending, which I didn't actually used to do. I just wore this for years, and then a friend had that other style, and I tried it, and I really liked it. And he was a smart friend. He had a couple of different ones. So Valender, this is called OptiSight. It's all one word, OptiSight. You should be able to find it on Amazon, no problem, or the Donegan site. The other one is specifically called OptiVisor. So those are two different brands of their different styles. I believe the plates are the same. I think the plates are interchangeable, and they make both glass and plastic plates. I have plastic plates, and I just accept that I have to replace them now and then, and that's going to be another area of weight. So if you have glass plates, that's going to be heavier than plastic plates, but they are more durable. They, I'm not sure if they make it or someone else makes a kit where you can add lights, and that again is going to add more weight. But the people I know who've used the ones with lights, which includes Andy Pieper before he switched over to digital, really liked it. But I've never tried it. I didn't want to deal with the weight. But last time I checked Amazon, these things were there. And they come in other colors than purple. I intended to have other colors than purple. My first one was purple. I paid extra. And then, because I wanted to have different ones for different magnification strengths, I attempted to buy another color. And as you can see, my attempt failed. And now I have two purple. But then I got like neon orange paint on one of them. So that's how I tell them apart. So I said I was going to work on the cloak because that would be hard to do later. And I think that I was correct about that. I'm going to switch to a bigger brush if I have one. These are some decent sized cloak folds. So this, if I want this to be black, I don't want to do a lot of highlighting. I just want to put in enough so that we can tell that there are folds in the cloth. Now I could say that this is red and I'm painting a black and white version of red. I didn't do that. I don't think I will. So before I said I went on the Facebook group to check and see if the ghoulie bags were still happening, and I saw a lot of these posted, and there are some very cool versions of this, and I think it's an interesting exercise to look at a figure like this, look at different ways people paint it, because there's kind of like, I don't know, tropes. There's traditional colors that we associate with vampires, traditional values and colors that we associate with a character like this. And I would say that most of the versions of it that I saw that people were posting hewed to tradition, but they each did it in a slightly different way. So it's interesting to see that. And when you take something like that where there are fewer variables, so it's like everybody has the same figure, and they're working within certain parameters of the same color scheme, it makes it easier to compare, oh, this person putting the red here or, the black there draws more attention to this or less attention to that. So as an interesting exercise, I would recommend looking at the different versions, the way people who have painted this figure. Valander said, someone was also asking the Discord explicitly mentioning compatibility with eyeglasses, so I passed it on in there. Yes, this works fine with eyeglasses. You can get clip-on things. My husband had some, but I never really ended up using them much. I got extreme evidence that the visor helps my blending this weekend, actually. Yeah, when I first started to paint, I think I was like 33, 34. And after a couple years, I was like, I feel like if I could see it better, I could paint it better. And that's when I got a visor, and I was like, and I am correct. Part of the problem is the not seeing. So the whole needing bifocals thing, I don't know what age you guys think that happens. I mean, I'm sure that it's already happened to some people who are in this conversation, not just myself. But before it happened to me, I thought that was something that happened to people who were like 60 years old or something. And it more happens to people who are like 40 years old. And I think the the more nearsighted you are, the earlier is more likely to happen. If you're someone who's nearsighted, of course. So I've already got a little, I mean, it's subtle, but there's already a little contrast there. I think I'll just go up a little more. I can always revise this later because as I'm getting further away from the figure with these highlights, I am less in danger of the reason that I'm painting this in advance of getting paint on it while I work on something else. Or if I try to work on it after I've worked on something else, getting paint somewhere I don't want paint to be. So now I could go to the arms, but they do not look to be completely dry. So let's work on these pants. So one thing I wouldn't want to do is this value that I put up here on the shirt. I talked to you before about alternating values and does it make sense that this is all the same thing? But if I put this super light color here, you are really going to look at his knees. And that's probably, unless you're telling a very specific story, that is probably not the story that you're trying to tell with your figure. So I want to keep that, a bit more on the darker side. And it is just primer, which I don't know why the gray is a little shiny, but the gray is a little shiny, so I'm going to go over too, and I'm making it just a little darker actually. So this way my shadow is already there. I'm just going to have to highlight up. Like I was saying, all that stuff I was saying about glazes and washes and color tinting, I don't get to do any of that trickery. I am really going to be concentrating on two things instead, and you will quickly find this if you try a monochromatic miniature, and this is why I recommend that you do. So you have value, which is this lightness and darkness thing, and you have texture. And that's it. That's all you got. So you can't just, put a creamy color on the hair and boom, people are going to understand that it's blonde hair. You have to think about, well, how do I represent the texture of hair in contrast to the texture of, skin versus clothes versus whatever. So we really think, we give color a lot of importance in our minds for being the thing that makes something look realistic and identifies objects. And well, black and white movies wouldn't work if that were true, right? So color is clearly not the only element that matters for that. So where things are lighter and darker, if you tried to paint non-metallic metal, you've already experienced some of that. I actually want to go down a brush size now that I'm not on that big cloak. You've got to have the extremes of, near white or white to near black or black to make it look shiny. Well, everything is like that. Everything has a different range, a different proportion, a different placement of light and darks. We can get away with not being super attentive to that when we have color, but not having color can push us to work on that more, which is good. This is one of the reasons that I recommend painting monochromatic figures. And all of the ways to do these textures and stuff, we used a little stippling brush last week, and I think I'm going to do it again this week. Start working on highlights for the shirt. So this shirt is going to be something like, silk is actually going to have a bit more contrast. I think something like cotton, that's got relatively low contrast and soft. The transitions from dark to light are a gentle slope on a material like cotton. You've got something like silk. The value range is going to be a little more extreme, and the transitions are going to be a little more abrupt. And then you have something really shiny, like satin or yeah, I guess satin, sateen, whatever we call that, gold lame, that kind of thing, then you're going to have an even more extreme value range between the lightest and the darkest areas, and the transition between those is going to be much more abrupt. And the greater the value range you have and the more abrupt the transitions, the harder it is to paint. That is non-metallic metal right there. That's why non-metallic metal is tough. But you can see where, like, when we're painting, we're tempted to think of, oh, well, it's just clothes, right? But clothes are all different kinds of material. That's really not specific enough. All of the time. I mean, sometimes that's what you have time for, is just, it's cloth, the end. But if you're trying to up your game, if you're working with some kind of constraints like this, where I don't have color, then it behooves me to think, okay, well, what is this shirt made of? The big challenge for me, at least, I don't know about people who can focus for more than 5 seconds, is remembering which pool of paint I'm on. I have actually, so, I showed you my palette before, and I do this in the class. I'll have people number them, because we'll be working on like foam plates or something, and number them from like 1 to 8 or whatever. And then you can make a note to yourself. It's like, okay, so the starting point of this shirt was 3. And then you at least kind of know roughly where you should be in the adding highlights and adding shadows category. And I probably should have tried to write that on my... Laying them out in order also helps. I don't know if I want to make the shirt too shiny because, it's the same value as his face. Currently, at least. And his hands that are also right beside it. And I need to make sure that I have ways to draw attention here. So the sculpt is helping me out with that. We've got this collar that frames the face. We've got a lot of detail here. So I don't want to take this shirt too shiny and have it compete with the face for a lot of attention. But at the same time, the shirt is kind of near the focal point. So if I sex it up a little, it's still getting the eye more where it's supposed to be. So probably not too bad of a plan to add a little more shiny. I think I got into my wrinkle with the lighter colored paint. And then the back. The back doesn't have that same problem because there's no face on the back. But it would be kind of weird if I went way shinier on the cloth on the back. So there is, I guess we'll say it's silk. So it's like a little bit shiny, but it's not like crazy shiny. And I should do the part under his chin. I will almost undoubtedly have to clean something up over here. I'm just going to go with shadows for a little bit because that is going to take a minute to dry now. So I'll come over here and do shadows on this arm while waiting for the neck part to dry. So I'm putting all of the shadow down, even though there's ridges and stuff. It's the underside of his arm. It's not getting any light. In fact, if I don't even highlight those ridges and wrinkles that are under the arm, this is not a contest piece where someone might go like this. No one will ever know. So in the interest of time savings, I will probably just ignore that. But it is better to have it, I need some shadow there. So it's better to have non-detailed shadow than just leave it this color and say that natural lighting is going to shadow it enough, because natural lighting does not shadow our little dudes enough. Our natural lighting. If we had light that was in scale to our little dudes, it would work. but I don't want to have to carry him around with a tiny light all the time. So I'm going to paint in what the tiny light would do. So this is kind of like a ruffle shirt, I guess. Having interrogated Bobby on previous occasions, sometimes Bobby just makes stuff up. So he may not have had a specific material texture in mind. Which, you know, a sculptor wouldn't always do, because I just talked about how we're making choices. So they're just going to sculpt the way cloth behaves as a physical object and let us determine whether it's shiny silk or matte wool or whatever other thing. Futuristic space plastic clothing. Certainly have seen that in a few movies. I'm probably not appropriate for a vampire. He's in totally different movies. And I might darken up there because I want to, you know, the shirt is meant to be light colored, so I shouldn't go bananas with the dark paint. So I totally slipped and went in my shadow area, and that's fine. I can fix that later. Once the paint's dry, I can just put the shadow back. This arm is raised in an interesting gesture, so maybe I'll even make this sleeve a little shinier, closer to the light. It's telling more story. Let's see. Am I staying on screen? Apparently not. I'm trying. I'm not very good at it, apparently, but I'm trying. I put a little piece of tape on my desk for where I think, you know, if the natural position that I fall into holding a miniature, the camera is supposed to be able to see it, but I also try to put my elbow in a particular place so that I will move. You know, I'll only spin here, I won't move it as much, but I would say that it doesn't always work. Because then when I go back and watch the videos, I'm like, oh, look at me being out of frame again. And I think I went up to this value. But in smaller areas. Oh, speaking of the whole visor thing, if you don't wear glasses and you're wondering whether glasses or, you know, magnification would help, just go to the drugstore and get some of the reading glasses. You can take a miniature with you to test them out. If they're letting people test glasses, last time I was there, you couldn't test sunglasses anymore. But I mean, you might want to start with 2.0. I think 3.0 is the highest magnification you can buy at the store for reading glasses. I could be wrong, but that is what I recall seeing. But, you know, different people find different magnifications easier to use, or you may, you know, like something for different tasks, the way we were talking about. The higher the magnification, the closer you have to hold it to your face, regardless of whether it's a visor or reading glasses or whatever. What I do not recommend are magnifiers that are attached to an arm. It's very cumbersome to try to get your brush under there, and it's a single lens instead of two lenses. That is how our eye works, so it's hard to aim and get the it's harder to aim and get the brush where you want it, which the whole point of the magnification is to be able to aim better and get the brush where you want it. So, and I am speaking from experience. I had a light that did that when I first started painting, and I also have a husband who only has one working eye, and he is very terrible at miniature painting because he cannot see. He can't see. Like, I'm like, okay, I want to put that brush exactly there where there's a little bit of lighter paint. He can't see well enough to do that. So it's not even a question of shaky hands or whatever. Your eyes have to work with you too. So I think I'm happy with the shirt. I am now realizing that perhaps I should have painted his skin when I painted the shirt. I'm going to go even paler, I think, because it's got that whole shiny thing going on. Someday I will have to ask someone at Reaper why the gray primer is a little bit shiny and the other two are not. I'm just going to accept that I will have to repaint some of the hair color. But did I just mess up his eye? And I'm debating whether to paint the hands the same value. And this, you can make this same choice with colored paint. So you can have, your value mixes, and you can paint the face overall a lighter value than areas of this body that are further down, further away from the light, or you just don't want them to look as important. So we do vary in color, and it's also, it's, if you're using the same mixes, like we've got the same color mixes, it's not going to look weird. It's not like somebody's going to look at it and go, oh, well, that face was painted, way lighter than the hands. It looks stupid. Also, it won't look weird because artists do this all the time. So people will have seen a lot of paintings, and even, photographers use lights to draw attention to the parts of the person that they want the portrait to emphasize. So we are used to seeing this. Movie directors and cinematographers do the same thing. So we need to borrow tricks from all of those people, because we're doing the same thing. We're trying to tell stories and establish characters. So why try to rewrite the book on how to do that when very clever people have already done it? And see, I've lost my line a little bit between the hand and the shirt, and that is okay. I can fix it later. I will let that dry a minute and work on the pants, I think. So I want them pretty dark gray. I suspect this is kind of the color they are. Yeah, that's kind of the color they are. And that, I was talking about how I can't always remember which value mix I'm on. So one way to figure that out is you get some on your brush and you put it on the miniature and you see if it matches. And if you're wrong, you try to scrub it off real quick. I mean, if it's way wrong. In this case, it was wrong in the sense that it was exactly like what was already there. So there was no need to scrub stuff off. And then the more you do that, the more you will start building up your eye to be able to do the matching of the value, which is a very useful skill, especially if you're trying to retouch stuff or mix paint. And as I said previously, even though these pants are nicely sculpted and everything, but they're not the main story of the figure, so I don't want to go too nuts. And I may have skipped. I think I skipped. And I did get too light of a value, and that's fine. I can just come back in with my other one and fix it. No panic. Acrylic paint covers over itself, and it's all good. I am being bad and not letting things dry now before I go in with new paint. So don't follow my example on that. That wrinkle just seemed a little too harsh because it's not sculpted that deep. So I'm just gonna leave the pants there. I mean, they're not the story, so who cares? Let's go back to the skin, which is the story. Though now I'm trying to decide if I want to paint this first. I don't think that I will mess the skin up with that, but I do want to get. You can see that there's like black streak of paint in there. It's probably not obvious on the video, and I didn't even see it at first either. So I don't mind this being a deep shadow, but black is probably too much. But I want to make his hair a little darker. Right in that section. Oh, and his mouth. I probably do want to address the mouth before I'm painting the things that are around the mouth. I don't think I want to go pure black. I mean, I want it to look, open. Like we have this tendency that if something's a hole or, I don't know, not a depression exactly, it's more than a depression, that it's going to be black, but sometimes that's too excessive. If I were using color, this would probably be like dark red. Alright, now I will start on the face. So I switched it to being a lighter value overall, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't still need some shadows. Because he's got a nice, well-defined bone structure happening here. Am I too close to the camera or not close enough? It doesn't seem to want to be focusing. Now this is where I get sad about not having color, because I like putting the weird color in the shadows and messing with stuff and having fun. And I don't get to do any of that. But that's okay. It'll look cool in its own right. But he's a vampire, so I definitely want to give him nice cadaverous cheek hollows. Go down the side of his nose a little bit too. And definitely under his nose. The nasal maybe will fold a little bit, and just a little bit under where the lower lip juts out. Alright, do you get where? Okay, you want me to actually be closer. This camera makes no sense. Alright. Don't think I put any of that shadow here on the temple. He's got nice frown lines. Emphasize that a little. It's almost like he's yelling, snarling. These are areas that I would be way more restrained with if this were a female figure. It takes very little darker value paint in shadow areas to, like you just put one little line, or do the line to either side of the eyebrows in a slightly darker color, and a female figure is going to look super stern. You start working on these like nasal labial folds and stuff, and they either start looking monstrous or really old or some other problem. There is a little bit of sexism involved in that because we're used to and thus prefer seeing women with very little facial expression. But it is what it is, so unless you are painting a character where you want them to look, old or monstrous or deranged, that is my advice. I feel like he's got like a little bump on his forehead. And I do not have my super zoom in specs. But let's see if I can. Sometimes when I see a little dot like that, it's because something's gotten stuck in the paint. Yeah, there's a little chip in there, and it's actually casting a shadow that I can see. And that can be enough to ruin a blend. Or at least hamper a blend. I mean, am I looking for that kind of thing when I'm painting a tabletop figure? Not necessarily, unless it really is strikingly not where it's supposed to be. But it's not too painful to take him out when you see him. So. I have seen people do that with an X-Acto as well. And because this is a male figure, I'm also happy to accentuate the jawline a little more. If he looks square jawed, well, that is just fine. Hopefully he's looking a little pastier and more vampire-like. And I'm definitely going to go up to full white. Which I would even if this were in color. And probably even if he weren't a vampire, if he were like a paler skinned person. That's funny. I didn't paint the lips, and I often don't paint the lips until the end of figures. But it's not like I'm going to be making... Because sometimes that's about color decisions. Because it's like I'm waiting to see what colors I use elsewhere. And if I've done something like reddish or purplish or whatever on a female figure, I will try to draw that into the lipstick. But that's not going to be too relevant for Mr. Vampire here. Because he's not getting color. So, no reason not to give him some lips. I guess teeth while I'm at it. Teeth are a very important part of being a vampire, after all. Now, because he is a male vampire, and I'm not painting him as if there's blood on his mouth, because how are you going to tell what if it's red or if I've just messed up? I mean, I was talking about how you can tell in a black and white movie, but remember, a movie's going to be, doing a zoom in focus on his face, and you'll be able to tell there's liquid. And that might be possible to pull off with miniatures, but is not a problem that I'm going to attempt to figure out how to do today. Teeth are not blinding white. Whether you're in black and white or in color. And they will look kind of weird as a rule if you do them full. I mean, you might have like a white highlight, but and because he's a vampire, I am gonna definitely A little bit more highlights on there. We definitely want to draw attention to the whole fanginess that he's got going on. Why will he not stay in focus? I guess it's like how you can't see them in a mirror. You also can't see them on a camera. So I'll call that good on the face and just work on the hands a little bit. He's got claws that are also probably not blinding white. I mean, something you can do if you're painting more tabletop style, or it's a animal monster type figure that has very prominent teeth. You can paint it whatever color, and then go over it with a wash that's like a little yellowy brown or something like that to make the teeth look, worn and dirty, and also knock back the white a little. If this were a human, like a living human person, I might not emphasize the hand bones are very detailed in the sculpting. And, we see that. We see them on people, and I often, if they aren't in the sculpting, I often like to paint them in. But you don't want to make someone look like super bony and cadaverous unless they're a vampire who happens to be super bony and cadaverous. So here, I do kind of want to emphasize the bone structure, instead of just having it be like a little accent. Although knuckles are always a little whiter than the surrounding skin. Can I do it? Yes, you see how my knuckles look white? That is because you're seeing the cartilage through the skin as well as the light hitting it. So it's like there's a double lightening effect on joints that are close to the surface of the skin. So knuckles, elbows, knees. Are the main ones where I do that kind of thing. But I don't think I will go to full white because his face is right there and I want his face to draw attention. And he's kind of got like fingernail claw type deals, but that is a level of detail that I wouldn't be painting in this. At this speed of painting, I wouldn't be going nuts on that unless I really wanted to give him nail polish or something like that, and I do not. I do want to fix that line that got lost here. In fact, I may want to add more line than was naturally present from the value difference between those two items, which was practically nil. And this is, I know people think lining is goofy, but if you think about it, the cuff is hanging over his sleeve or his hand, and it would cast a shadow. The light would make it cast a shadow. And a lot of dark lining, that's what it is. It's duplicating those small cast shadows. It's like under his belt would also be casting a shadow onto this upraised area. If I blackline that, that does effectively creates that visual effect. But it is also worth exaggerating even where it wouldn't always happen, because it helps make the miniature so much more legible. Alright, so skin is done, shirt is done, pants are done. What do we want to do now? I think the armor. And possibly I should have done the armor before I did the shirt, because I kind of want to goof around with some texture, because, you know, I've got a little bit of a texture difference between the skin and the cloth, but I'd say it's dramatic. Throw some initial shadows in here, and then work on texture with the highlights. I'll say this is leather, and I further want to say that he's had this armor a little while. I mean, he's a vampire. Some of his stuff is probably pretty old. So let's add some weathering and antique that up. Has anyone got fun plans tonight? You're just anticipating the invasion of the candy seekers. Which we don't actually get a ton of candy seekers here. I think we kind of do look like the haunted house that no one wants to go near. Plus, it's a long walk, so I think the only parents that would make their kids candy trick-or-treat at our house would be ones that are trying to tire them out as quickly as possible. So that's a big overhang. I actually should have just gone ahead and gotten it with straight black. Oops. But maybe not on that part. But we'll fix that up during the textury part of the proceedings. And I will probably change the belt to be some other value, like either lighter, pretending it was tan, leather, or darker. So I'm not being super precise with these because, like I said, I'm probably gonna be weathering, texturing. But there's one of the areas where, you know, we don't get to do stuff like weathering would be hard to do. How am I adding places where it looks kind of brown or whatever to the bottom of his cape? Like, I mean, I probably can do it. Maybe I will, but it'd be value only. So if it were a brown cape, I wouldn't be able to also do like a muddy look if they were similar values of things. So, all right, now I want to get a different brush. Last week, I think I messed around with this one, which is like a bristle stipple brush. I got like a pack of 5 of these off Amazon, and these are actual bristle, like this is boar bristle hair for oil painting. So this is much stiffer than the kind of thing we usually use, although boar bristles lose stiffness in water, which acrylic paint has water. And then these ones are the goat hair ones. This is from a set of 3 from Army Painter. This is a little bitty one that Rosemary makes. I also have this thing that's actually just called a stipple brush from Wamp's Kickstarter, so I don't even know where I'm going to start. I'm not just going to do the stipples. Oh, and say you don't want to buy a brush. If you have an old flat or angle brush, or even a round, you can cut the bristles short enough that they become, I don't know, they become stiffer because there's just not as much area for them to flex in. This seems like it might be a little hard to control on this size of surface. Honestly, this is a little optimistic, but let's see what we do. I do need to make sure that I get lots of that paint off. Now this isn't going to be the only thing I do. Last week when I was doing it, I was trying to paint like a felted hat. And I'm not just going to like dot down. So when I was painting the felted hat, I wanted it to look like little dots. This I want it more just to look like, you know, where the tanning on leather is getting worn, and you're seeing to the underlying color a little more. So I'm going to stipple it and drag it, and just generally, you can see a little bristle just fell off. That's one of the dangers of the boar bristle brushes, is they shed bristles like nobody's business. But since this is not an oil painting, it's really not that big a deal. Because I can just get that with tweezers or compressed air. I probably should have started with this lighter color from the beginning. When you're doing texture, you want to see more strokes and transitions, so you don't want to be too near in value with your texture strokes. I mean, depending on the kind of type of texture, but as a rule. But I am also using it for the lighting, so I'm concentrating on places that would be getting more light. Happily for me, those are also going to be places where, you know, it's getting more worn. Like this edge here is going to get a lot more wear and tear. It's going to rub up against things way more than the part that's, you know, at his back covered up by the cloak. And I could come back in with my darker color, and perhaps I will, and reintroduce shadows and also introduce more texture. I switch to the bitty one. Which is definitely, you can make a nice bitty one for yourself with a cut down brush. I feel like I didn't get enough texture on the top curve of the breastplate. Concentrate on edges and upright parts. But now I'm going to switch to a real brush. Maybe not my best real brush though. Because we're going to jab and poke. A little bit. And try to refine it and add, you know, different types of patterns. I don't have to spend all day doing this. If I were painting, you know, when I paint for Ron and you see textured leather ones, I have not used the stipple brush. I've done it the all day way. I mean, maybe I should. Maybe I should try it. I think it might be an interesting experience to try painting this part and then go over it with the texture brush. I mean, it might just be undoing all the work, but it might also make some interesting patterns. So when it looks too painty is when I'm wiping it away. This is one of those things that can be easier in color, because if I were doing this in color, I would finish this up with a nice glaze that added a different color and added some richness and worked in the texture stuff. And I can't do any of that I'm trying to get the breastplate part as light as I want. All right, let's get a good brush back. But if I do decide that this is an excessive amount of texture for the purpose, I can come back in with, I can still thin down a glaze or a wash with these gray colors and work it in a little more. So for the point of view of adjusting the texture, glazes and washes can still come in useful. But there is no point in attempting to add color to my colorless movie vampire. And let's see if I have a good beauty brush. The last thing I can do is I can look for places that kind of ended up looking like scratches and make them scratches. So scratch, you want a lighter color at the top, and then the darker color underneath. It's going to be easier to do the darker color first, I think, so let's do that. So instead of me trying to be random and failing because humans are very bad at being random, I let the stipple brush be random. And then I just look for places where it's kind of doing what I want it to do. Didn't seem to do it a lot on this part. So I will just bake it a little. And I want to get my lighter color. Have that so it's facing the light. I think I was doing it wrong when I first started. So that might be a little too much emphasis for, the type of character he is or whatever. But since texture, texture is one of my main kinds of contrast that I have here. I don't have color. I don't have hue. I don't have, cool versus hot colors. Just the value and the texture, pretty much. I think I'm going to stick with it. Maybe he's out fighting war because he needs to have some better minions to take care of his stuff. Alright. Oh, that's true. I was doing... Bobby has sculpted some very... you can actually see the little eyelet holes. The edges of the eyelet holes on here, which is just insane.
might as well finish up these details since it's not like I have to switch colors. I got the colors I got. I'll do my lining and whatnot now. I do have to still do the pouch and the belts. But I think I will make them black like the boots. Do both those at the same time. And then I kind of have to decide about the texture thing too. It's like, well, I put all that texture on his armor. Do I also put all that texture on his boots? I don't think I do. And I probably should have painted this dark part before I painted the little edge of the eyelet holes, but I make mistakes all the time. I just go back and fix them. Mistakes are not the scary part. And you don't have to go back and fix them. You can say, I'm just painting this guy to have fun on Halloween, and good enough is good enough. Oops. Well, okay, that maybe I'll fix. Because that was just a totally errant brush stroke. And when I did the stippling, a lot of lighter paint actually got up under this section, so I'm having to redo that. And I think I will paint the laces as if they are much darker than the surrounding material. I mean, you can go darker, you can go lighter. He's a vampire, I want to go darker. And I said I wanted to paint this black like the boots, so I'll go ahead and get that started so it can dry while I work on something else. So you notice I didn't bother with much texture in the shadows, and that is the nice thing about texture. We don't see as much of it in the shadows, so we don't have to spend a lot of time painting what we're not going to see. If I were doing a, I want this to be my very best effort entry for Reaper or something, would I put some texture in the shadows? Yes, I would. So he's actually got two things that would need non-metallic metal. I didn't think about the clasp on this thing. And I could paint this as if it were carved from bone or as if it were non-metallic metal. And I suspect that I'll want to go with... What a good question. I don't know. If you have an opinion, tell me in the chat. And we'll get to that part later. Did I paint this hand? I did not. So maybe I'll paint this poor guy's hand. I didn't realize I was only working on one hand before. Okay, that brush is a little small for that. Because we're trying to get done in time. Will I make it? I don't know. I mean, I've got the boots left and the hair, the non-metallic metal, and the cape. I don't know. I'm going to get close, but I don't know if I'll 100% finish by the end of the show. But we can hope. I mean, I'm getting you know, the boots are not the story of the figure, so I won't have to go nuts on those. So nobody has Halloween plans? Not even to just sit around and eat like all the candy? Yeah, we went to the drugstore to pick up a prescription yesterday, and my husband comes out with this like bag full of candy, and I'm like, why? Why is there a bag full of candy? He's like, well, it's Halloween. And I'm like, yeah, but like 2 kids come to our house, and we normally turn the lights off, so we don't even get the 2 kids because they why tucker them out on our perilous walk up a hill. And the answer is because my husband wants to eat candy, is why there's Halloween candy in the bag. So just like the other hand, I'm going to go ahead and really emphasize that underlying bone structure. I'm not going to go too much lighter in value. So hopefully, even though they are very similar values, I have managed to portray the skin as being a different kind of material than the shirt. And then when I get to the boots versus the cloak, hopefully that will be a similar deal. Which we may be there. I will probably leave the back of the cloak till last, because if I don't get there, you can still look at him here and it'll look fine. And you saw me paint the inside, so it would not be a wildly different experience. All right. Well, I love hair, and I want him to have eyebrows before you guys go on about your day. So let's see. I'm stirring my paint a little because I'm noticing some separation just in the darkest colors, interestingly. So I don't want his hair to be like full on black because of the cloak. I mean, I guess I could try to really hunker down and use texture for everything, but I think having a little bit of a value separation would be useful. Just make sure that all of the hair has paint on it, since I was messing around with stuff. And also, it's time to give him eyebrows. And I'm going to go just a little darker on the initial amount of eyebrows, although maybe that's too dark. Because eyebrows often are slightly darker than a person's hair, or they're like the darkest colors that you'll see in a person's hair. I mean, this will be most noticeable if you look at people who have blonde or red hair, that they have slightly darker eyebrows. It looks like I gummed up one eye, but we're not going to worry about that. And then Bobby actually has sculpted hair texture on here. But if he hadn't, you could use little brush strokes to simulate it. like I'm having trouble getting this eyebrow to look lighter. Maybe it's just the angle or something, and it actually does look lighter, and I'm just not accepting it. But I'll probably leave that there for now. And I will add some more shadow to his hair, because hair is, I mean, you know, healthy, shiny style hair, which I know vampires are undead, but he's not getting dried out, gross undead hair. He's going to get, like we did on the zombies a few weeks ago, he's going to get shiny hair. And he needs more shadow to make that happen. It looks like it's got these parts on. All right. And now the highlighting, which I'm not going to worry too much about where the little indentations of strands are on the sculpt. Hair is a strange material in the sense that the tactile texture and the visual texture are somewhat different. And Bobby already put the tactile texture in for me, so I'm ignoring that, and I can add a little bit later if I feel like I need to. But I'm going to focus on the visual texture, which would be where the light is hitting it and making it look shiny. And that's based on the overall shapes of the hair, so like how it is, you know, kind of a helmet shape over the top of his head, and then where the curls turn up and stuff. It really doesn't have anything to do with strandiness. Has to do with the shapes that the hair is lying on top of, or being blown around by the wind would also change the shapes of hair. But you see that I'm using this little type stroke, so I'm simulating the strands, or, you know, acknowledging the effect of the strands through that. But you can see it's already looking a little more like shiny hair because of that band of highlights. Let's just go ahead and pump up the volume on that. They are maybe not ideally placed, but I'm going to live with it. If you want to know more about hair, if you go to my website, on the main page, there is a link to an article where I have some reference photos for hair, and then that links to the video on the Reaper YouTube page where I did like a hair tutorial on video. And this is not in the Beyond the Kit playlist. This is somewhere else on Reaper's site. Was when they first started doing Reaper Toolbox, it wasn't just Anne's show. It was a variety of us when we were available to Texas, when they had, you know, at that time only they had the cameras and stuff. We hadn't figured out about these document cameras. So we had to be kind of on site to film videos. And there's a few different things. I think there's one of Michael Proctor talking about shaded metallics. I think there's one with Sergey Calvo talking about non-metallic metallics. And I'm sure I'm forgetting a bunch. So as I'm getting lighter and lighter in value, I'm really decreasing the area that these super shiny highlights are covering. Hello, focus.
It's still no focus. We come here, there's focus. Nope.
Well, maybe figuring out these document cameras didn't solve all the problems. Then, of course, you can fiddle around with this stuff, and I often do. But I will not fiddle him too much today because we have other things to paint. You know what? I am going to take those teeth out to a pure white highlight. They are not standing out enough. But it is just a highlight. There are darker colors kind of on the sides of the teeth. All right, so am I done with the hair? Now I kind of check, okay, do I need to have lines between any of these strands to bring out the texture of locks and whatnot? Do I need to add a little bit of light down here in the shadow area? Those are kind of, I don't even think about that stuff until I've gotten in the bulk of the where should it be light and where should it be dark aspect.
So he's getting along.
But no, that would not be efficient. All right, let's see if I can do the boots pretty quick. Boots and belt. So I want this to be leather, but I don't want it to be like super worn leather. Apparently he's replaced his boots more recently than his armor. So I'm not aiming for the super smooth approach I was going for with the skin, but I'm also not going for the extremely textury approach of the breastplate and kilt. I don't know what armor is called if it's like that. Probably not skirt. I don't think that'd be very war appropriate, but I could be wrong. All right. And because it's there, it's supposed to be black, I don't have to do huge areas. To finish this off, I'm really just doing highlights. Because that's really one of the secrets of painting black, is leaving a lot of the surface black so that the viewer perceives it as black. I often find that it's easier for me to see where these wrinkles in shoe leather and boots and stuff are if I turn the figure so I'm looking down like this at the foot. So that is why I'm doing that. And here I'm doing that same thing where I'm trying to think about not only where would light hit this more, but also where would it get rubbed more in everyday use for the leather to be looking lighter in those spots. Might be interesting to paint the trim of this bag as if it were metal or something, but I'm probably not going to do that simply on the basis of time. I don't know about you, but I've noticed that my shoes really tend to show a lot of wear and tear on the toe, so I very often, emphasize the highlighting there, but it's the part that's jutting out, and it's the part that's going to get most worn. I mean, I'm one of those people who doesn't go nuts polishing their shoes, so that's probably why that's happening to me. But I'll probably call that good on the pouch and the boots and the thing. So now I should do the inside. Make sure we're down to black there. That looks like a bump actually, so I'm just going to leave that. These folds are smaller, so I'm going to do them while I've got my small brush out. And while I'm waiting for that back part that juts up to dry. Now here I will probably give it more highlights than I did on the inside, because the inside is really pretty shadowed. But let me hit this a little bit. And I do actually want to keep that fairly dark. It kind of frames his face. It would be something that would be interesting to paint it like red or something like that to help draw the eye. But I don't get any red, so I'm going to do that. Have any of you painted monochromatically? And if you haven't, are you thinking about trying it now? Because you'll see one of the nice effects of it is, you guys know how slow I am. And I've just about finished this guy. And I finished the figure last year that I painted. The ghost one. Because once you got those mixes out, that's all you got. So you start making it work. You can kind of zip through. Now, I imagine that if I could really see that part, I would be concerned about how the blending is terrible. But I can't, so I'm going to be happy with it. And I can fix it later if I want. But I said I would probably work on non-metallic metal. And I also have to paint those fasteners for his armor. So because these are little small places, I'm going to start pretty dark and just do highlights. That's also kind of the easy way to do lining on little small things, is to start with your lining color and then proceed. But I can paint the fastenings when I'm waiting for that to dry. They don't need to be super dramatic. I just want them to stand out a little from the background material. Green Users has been thinking of painting a low night scene. Ooh, that is interesting. That is also an interesting challenge, to paint unusual lighting scenarios instead of just the lighting's coming from above. Which I have painted him, even though he's a vampire and you only see him at night. He has light from above. Gas lamps or something, I guess. Whatever would fit in your world to make that rationale. We'll say that is where I put him. Alright, I think the non-metallic metal-y parts are ready for painting. I do want to think a little bit. I mean, I should have thought a lot more about where my light source was from the beginning, but this is one of the challenges of trying to do everything at once in painting miniatures. I got caught up in the whole texture of the material thing and did not pay attention to where is my light coming from. I mean, generalized, but it's good to know more specifically sometimes. Okay, I'm trying to figure out where the fastener is here. He's killing me with these sideways things. I mean, it's less problematic when I'm not trying to paint on camera and stay in focus and in the correct scene and a bunch of other things that I'm not actually managing to accomplish today, I don't think. And perhaps I never accomplish, but I do try. I know it doesn't seem that way, but I do try. Definitely want to have very controllable amounts of paint on my brush. And I'm just going to have to fix that dark line later, clearly. I cannot keep it intact. So a circular item like this is kind of like when I was painting the scratches. So the light, I'm imagining it's hitting here, and then it's also going to reflect up from that edge. Likewise, it's going to reflect up from this top ridge on the skull and also the bottom one. But then eventually I have to narrow it down and just have one brighter part, which is going to be the bottom. Right there. And one lighter little bit. A few spots. I will just hit there too. And I'll probably call that good. Fix that shadow I keep messing up.
Alright, so there now he's got some non-metallic metal. Sort of. Where are we? Oh, I have 15 minutes to try to paint the back of this glove. And the stone. So the stone, I might actually do a wash. Because even though it's just value, it'll still kind of have an effect. Sorry, I want to put a little brush and sealer in there. When I was finishing up the Cynthia that I had started last week with you all, I was doing washes with just water, and I wasn't liking how out of control they got sometimes, which I'm sure is largely me not doing it very well, but here, since this is stone, I do kind of want it to have more mottled random texture. I want to make sure I get nice and dark in the crevices. Oh, and now I have to write Bobby thank you later. He made the kind of stones I like. They've got nice texture, so they should dry brush well, which we'll hopefully find out in a moment if that wash dries. All right, hopefully he's looking like a nice old movie kind of villain. And I will work on some of these folds. So if you weren't here earlier, I was talking about how a lot of people on the Reaper Facebook group, and I would guess the Discord if I ever remembered to go look there, have posted pictures of this figure that they've painted. And it's really interesting to go and compare the different choices that people have made with the colors, because there's kind of like a suite of colors that we think of as vampire-y. So you'll see red, of course, red, black, white, and then purple is a common other one. But everyone's interpreted that a little differently. They put those colors in a different place, and some people have made him have black hair, and some people have made him have white hair, and some people have kind of gone in between. And it's interesting. You can learn a lot about value and color choices and how effective they are when you study something like that. And the quarterly contest is a good resource for this too, because everyone's working on the same figure, but interpreting it however they want. The thing about this figure that makes it particularly useful for starting to look at and assess the visual impact of different color choices and different value choices is that because that color scheme is so constrained,
it's going to make the comparison easier than, you know, got something like the quarterly contest. People are very creative in their interpretations, and you will see wildly different color schemes and setting and stuff like that. So it's still, I mean, definitely still look at that, but if you're just starting to hone your eye of comparing figures and getting information about, oh, here's the impact putting, you know, light here and dark there, and using the red over here is, you know, so far away from the face that maybe it doesn't draw attention where you want it, or but using it over here is really effective. Fewer variables makes that kind of comparison easier. And also, it's just nice to go see what cool things everybody's painting. I probably have spread the highlight out a little too much for black, because these folds are really nice to paint. But in theory, I could always come back in with more black later and fix it. And if I were painting in color, I would be using blue liner in the shadows, because the cool temperature of the blue would make them recede even more. But alas, no color for me. And the blending on that is not awesome, but honestly, I often paint black. I go up like this, and then I go back down through my values, tightening up the location of where the highlights are, making them as compressed as possible, and then also smoothing the blending out. So this is the first part of how I would really paint black. You're just not going to watch the agonizingly boring part of where I stress about it for 2 hours. I mean, a cape this size, it would take some stressing. I am just adding a little water to my paint, because even though this is a wet palette, there's been some evaporation. Because I tend not to fill my wet palette sufficiently when I'm painting on stream, so that I don't knock things over and make a giant mess. Okay, the problem with that highlight is that it was not at all where I wanted it to be. I don't know if Quindy popped something up when hi Thin Redline, when I said the quarterly contest, but if you aren't familiar with that, I definitely recommend checking it out. Valander chose the miniature for this next round, if I'm recalling correctly, and it's the dwarf wizard riding a pony, which is awesome, and I very much look forward to seeing how everyone interprets that. That is the privilege of the winner of the previous one, is to get to choose the miniature for the next one. And they post these, I don't know if it's exclusively on the Facebook page. It might be. I think it's probably exclusively on the Facebook page, because then you can vote easily on the pictures. You just like the ones you like, and John figures out the rest. So I think I have a few minutes. So yeah, I'm just gonna try to smooth the blending a little. If I can. If I can't, oh well. We'll only look at them from the front. So this guy was the miniature of the month, but that just meant you could get him free free with a minimum purchase order, but you can just go buy them on an ongoing basis now. So it's not me to only be showing them at the end of the month. Well, I mean, I did show them earlier, like in the package and stuff. And then Quindy confirmed that there are still Ghoulie bags left. So if you want to get in the American shop, at least, I think I heard that the UK one ran out. So if you want this guy and some other stuff, you can place an order today and get some goodies. In an ideal world, there would be a lot more messing than there's going to be here. But I don't know how much is evident on camera anyway. The camera seems really good at pointing out when my blending sucks, but it doesn't seem very good at capturing when my blending is okay. All right, so that is the back of the cape. Probably should take that down a little, but we'll call it good. Zoom out a little. Quindy confirms that voting is on the Facebook page uploaded by John to an album. Oh, that's right, because also the entries are anonymous, so you send the entries into John, and then he uploads them, and we vote on that. You can still get him free today. Is he an opera singer? I think that he's calling his troops to charge because he's wearing armor. So I was trying to find a reason why he was wearing armor. So that is how I interpreted him, that he and his vampire troops are about to go all vampire on somebody. Oh, right, is the wash dry. I forgot about the base. We can do that real quickly, hopefully. Where is a good brush for that? I'll start this color, I think. Oh, look at that nice texture Bobby's put on the stones for us. He's made me very happy. And not a lot of people who are at the beginning, so I'll say again that my inspiration is partly, I did a limited, monochromatic palette miniature last year for Halloween, so I guess that's a tradition now. But I chose to do like black and white movie style, partly because it fits this character pretty well, but also partly because I enjoyed watching Werewolf by Night. So if you haven't seen that and you're looking for something holiday-ish to do tonight, and you have Disney Plus or a friend's house that you can invade that has Disney Plus, I recommend it. I enjoyed it a lot. Very much captured the old black and white movie look. Probably better than I have captured it here. But I do sincerely recommend painting a monochromatic miniature, because you have to do stuff like I've done where you think about texture and value placement, because you don't get to have all of the many benefits of color. You don't even entirely realize how many benefits of color there are until you tell yourself that you're not going to have it anymore. So that was this guy's this year's monochromatic figure. This was last year's, so it's monochromatic, doesn't have to be black and white. This one is like kind of a ghostly teal blue. I had some others, and last night I thought I should go try to dig them up, and then I totally forgot. But the witch that you can get in the ghoulie bag is Cynthia the Wicked. She's got a little cat and this pumpkin. And there's a different... I'm not sure how well it's going to show up on screen, but her black is highlighted with pale green, where his is just straight gray. And I would say that hers is a little more interesting to look at for that reason. So when I'm not painting monochromatic, I would not just be using those straight grays on black. And this was last week. If you're interested in kind of the more tabletop version of this paint color scheme, I painted that on stream. So you can go find the video. I'm sure it's still on Twitch, but it's also up on the Reaper's YouTube channel now. I feel like you can see the green a little better on that one. So you have a lot of highlight options when you're painting colors like black, and you have a lot of shadow options when you're painting colors like white. It doesn't have to be plain grays, and in fact, I tend to recommend that it's not plain grays. If I take my hand away, well, I guess I have to cover the blue too. You guys can't tell whether I've switched to my looking at things in black and white mode that this camera has. I love to torture you all with, because I think thinking about our values is very important. And that is what I had to do painting this scheme. And I think it turned out pretty well. I think we've got, it's very dark on the cape and the shoes. And okay, the shoes or the boots don't really stand out from the cape. But the viewer kind of guesses that they're there. And also that's like not the important part of this guy. I'm going to remove the distracting blue from him. And that dark color I think works well as a frame for the lighter skin. And then by making his skin, have kind of the strongest value contrast, certainly for a large section, I mean, there's strong value contrast on the NMM too, but that helps that stand out. So I'm pretty happy with how he turned out. I mean, I'm sure that if I put on my better goggles and look at the blending on this cloak, I'm going to scream, but it's Halloween. I'm supposed to scream, right? So I think we're at time, right? Oh, wow. I finished him exactly in time, like I even did the base. Now, to be fair, I did not paint the black base rim and clean up the messy parts, but that is the fastest that I have ever painted a figure that wasn't like pure speed paint craziness. Which maybe this is a trick to remember next time I do speed paint craziness, is just painted monochrome, because you can go nice and fast. So I'm pretty pleased with how he turned out. And now I'm going to have to go tell Bobby how much I appreciate his new stone work. And I have no idea what I'm going to do next week, when it's not Halloween anymore and I'm supposed to not be doing spooky things. Although, we're miniature painters. We like spooky things all the time. Here, I'll return to my Halloween costume to sign off. Nope. It's hard to get your googly eyes centered when you're looking at the camera. And I'm sure that Queenie's going to find someone else who's having fun today, doing something that we would enjoy watching. And if you have any requests for what I do next week, feel free to DM me here or on the Reaper forums, or maybe don't do it on Discord, because I have good intentions about checking Discord, and then I never do. I'm very old. I don't think Discord works with my brain. And you get to play with the tentacles. I mean, I guess if I was really cool, I'd have some kind of automated tentacle system going. I'm not old. I'm old enough. I'm old enough to be like, oh, stop making new things. I've barely caught up with the old things. I mean, it only seems like a few years ago that I was finally like, all right, I guess I'll try this Instagram thing. But all right, I'm going to stop talking and let Quindy find you something else spooky and hobby appropriate. Yes, as Quindy says, I hope everyone has a great Halloween. Come back next week and tell me about your costumes and how much candy you ate and how many parties you went to and all that good stuff. So I'll see you then. Bye.